Welcome to another episode of Rec Talk. Today we've got Terry Wolfendale, Terry the Wolfman Wolfendale, should we call it? So Terry, Pulse Outsourcing, that's your bag, right?
Yes, it is. Yes, Pulse Outsource, supporting temporary recruitment agencies for 20 odd years with payroll funding and back office services.
Payroll funding and back office services and kind of invoice finance, and then we've got a shameless plug here, but Rectal's got an entire category on all of this. But no, that
was cheap. That was really cheap. Yeah.
We've never done it before, so I want to throw it in there.
Yeah.
But no, so that entire world is a bit of a minefield to recruiters, especially given how that sector tailors largely to the recruitment world, right? Because my understanding is that recruitment is probably the biggest part of that market, followed then by like construction and care and stuff like that, isn't it?
Manufacturing, yeah. No, absolutely. Recruitment is a massive sector, industry that it lends itself very nicely to invoice factoring, back office services.
Yeah, and we were just kind of saying off camera that actually you and we kind of stepped into that minefield accidentally, because when we first set up, it was like, oh well, let's have a look at investors, because you're almost told, aren't you, when you're trying to set up a recruitment business, no, you're going to need an investor because it costs so much to do it.
It's so expensive.
Yeah.
You speak to, and there'll be like people sat in big corporates right now listening to this, and they'll get it, right? In that you'll speak to sort of associate directors and we're like, oh, you ever going to set up on your own? And they'll be like, yeah, I just need to get the right amount of money behind me, get a couple $100,000 behind me and I'll be able to do it. And we used to hear that all the time. We was like, a couple $100,000, like no, not a chance. Yeah. So we ain't setting up, like,
But also at that point, I remember we used to sit there and go, like, I don't want to get to like associate director and ops director level when I've gone past all the BD, making my desk, and now I'm running a P&L. Yeah. To then having to go back and do the whole BD and all that sort of stuff again.
Chasing purchase ledger vacancies.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's a harder move to make because by that stage you're on a bigger salary, you're on a bigger package. You sort
probably
of
got more responsibilities in life as well.
Tougher. Yeah, true. Yeah.
So yeah, it is a bit of a minefield, isn't it? And we've had the likes of Simon J and Bobby Russell come over and kind of talk to us about the invoice financing world. But I mean, you're kind of as the lender, you're kind of in the thick of it, right? So you're literally talking to them throughout that journey, aren't you?
Yeah.
So in terms of the type of businesses that you work with, then are you talking sort of small startups? Are you talking scaled businesses? Are you talking like big FTSE listed businesses? Like who's your portfolio?
Startup and scaling businesses predominantly. So it just, alongside what you've just been talking about there, the product lends itself very nicely to startups, which is why I find it quite staggering at times that you've got top billers, you've got people who are very good at their jobs in recruitment, kind of putting off starting up because they're not aware of the solutions that are out there to them, because it lends itself perfectly to it. It kind of takes care of the cash flow aspect for temp payroll, and you can get solutions for perm placements as well. And it takes care of all the sort of back office aggro so that they can basically just focus on selling, doing what they're very good at.
Why do you think that lack of awareness exists?
I don't know. I mean, I think probably as far as our industry is concerned, the invoice finance, invoice factoring industry is concerned, because it's such a popular industry for us, because recruitment is such an active industry for us. I think there's an assumption that anyone operating at any level almost in a recruitment business has got some awareness of invoice finance, invoice factoring. But I discover almost weekly that isn't the case. There's a lot of people that are pausing on making the jump and setting something up on their own because they think there's too many obstacles financially, and there definitely aren't. It's probably it's got the lowest barrier to entry ever, I think, recruitment with the support that's available to get started.
What the qualifications even need to set the whole thing up, right? Because there's a lot of people who are now coming from the sector that they're trying to recruit into. So care workers are opening up care agencies, lorry drivers are opening up driving agencies, and these guys haven't got any recruitment experience. The only thing they've got is the network and the knowledge of that sector. And even those guys, I mean, have you seen much uptake in terms of customers that you're onboarding now based on no experienced recruiters who are opening up agencies?
A bit. I mean, we're always a little bit more cautious about that for obvious reasons. They know their market from one side of the fence, but it's very, you know, they don't understand all the intricacies. And I've seen them get things like just get their margin wrong, just not have enough margin in their placements because they've forgotten to incorporate national insurance and holiday pay and various other almost a growing list of bits and pieces every year that are required to kind of get chipped in. So they can sort of, you know, and aren't as robust at getting terms and conditions signed or all that sort of stuff. So there's kind of like that, you know, we've got to be a little bit more cautious about how we support them through that startup journey.
I suppose from your point of view, though, because you guys self-fund, don't you? So you're not going off to then a bank and almost passing the risk on. You're inherently taking that risk, right? So you've really got to be 100% sure whether you're backing this person and their business plan and kind of their growth and ambition plans or lifestyle plans. You got to kind of really dig deep into it, right?
Yeah, definitely, to a point. But you know, the main concern is you've just got to be confident that they're going to be setting up and running a business that, you know, is going to generate enough margin that there's enough to pay HMRC, there's enough to put aside for their VAT, that they've got enough margin in it so that we're not literally squeezing every last penny out just to make sure they can make payroll each week, which does happen and does even happen with some established agencies who push down on margin, let their margin get squeezed to win more business, but to the point where it's barely washing its own face in terms of meeting the payroll every week. So there's all those challenges that you have to kind of take into account when you're you know, looking at a business.
How much time do you guys spend as a business then educating these startups with that sort of stuff? Like because the reality is, like, whose responsibility is that, right? Because it's not the accountant's responsibility that they've chosen, and it's sort of, it could be argued that it's not your responsibility either to explain these things. So how much of that do you guys actually do, and kind of whose responsibility is that?
Increasingly, I'm doing more and more of it, and this is just a sort of personal position, really. But you know, I'm quite active on LinkedIn, and I'm sort of, you know, I'm always kind of, because it's a core market for us, I'm always kind of pushing that startup scaling sort of market, and sort of took the decision a little while ago to add some extra value there around, well, you know, I can point them in the direction of certain resources, and quite frankly, there may be a certain nuance about what they want to do and how they want to do it that doesn't fit with Pulse Outsource. But it doesn't mean that I can't help point them in a different direction, point them to some of the people you mentioned earlier on, you know, that are experts as well, that can help them out. So I kind of try and position myself as someone that can just help a startup get off the ground and get through that planning stage and work out all their options.
It's that thing, isn't it, of it takes like a village to raise a kid, right? And I think if you kind of take that analogy into the recruitment world, it would take a village in the sense that it would take an invoice financer or like an outsourced solution for payroll and invoicing to handle that part of kind of what the education piece is. I think that the accountants have a responsibility as well to be able to sit there and say, look, this is how you need to conduct business. This is how you need to make sure that you're accounting for things in the right way. The things that the recruiters should already be in control of, really, is how to run a desk.
Yeah, his or her own motivations to build, right?
The rest of it has to be an education piece, though, I think, from the individual suppliers for that particular recruitment business. So I think, I mean, look, we certainly made mistakes and still make mistakes when it comes to kind of the running of our recruitment business. But I guess there's been times during those periods where we've looked at our suppliers and we've gone, why haven't you told us that? Like, surely, like, this can't be a one-off thing. I don't understand why you wouldn't have told us that in advance. So have you had instances in your sort of in your experience, whether that's been at Pulse or even before that, where you've had to really kind of educate some of your agencies and really kind of gone through, look, this let's take if somebody's got too much concentration, for example, with one
particular account, that kind of thing. How much? How soon before you guys tend to step in? And
it's definitely it's an ongoing thing. So if we get a new client, particularly a client that's brand new to invoice factoring, invoice finance, back office, this world, then it's always very intensive to begin with in terms of just educating them around the parameters of the facility. But the parameters of the facility are really set, you know, they're there for a reason. They're set up to encourage good business sense at the end of the day, you know, and good trading practices for both of us. So it is things like And it's really tempting for especially the early stage recruiters to kind of, as soon as they get a new deal, it's like, great, but actually it's only a good deal if they're going to pay their bills, and if we check that customer out and they haven't paid anyone for 9 months, it's not a good deal, forget about it. So for example, I always encourage clients to credit check customers as early as they possibly can. If they're signed up with us and they're a client of ours, it doesn't cost anything to give us a company reg number and we will check them out and we'll tell them what they look like and whether or not they're a good risk or not ultimately. And I will literally be like, do that as early as you possibly can. You wouldn't want to spend 2 months caught in a customer trying to win some new business, and then when you finally win it, you get them credit checked and they're not going to, it's rubbish business. It's not worth it. You need to walk away from it, and you've invested 2 months in that you've wasted. So I'm always, as an example, kind of like, just do it as early as you possibly can. Yeah. Just get into the routine, make it part of your new business process to credit check customers really early doors. So,
why do you think that there would be people that wouldn't do those things? Because for most of our listeners, that's going to be like, well, I mean, that's an obvious thing to do, right? But why do you think there's agencies or startup agencies out there that wouldn't do those things?
It's just mindset, I think. I mean, I think a lot are coming from a great salespeople, a great consultants. So that's how they're wired, and that's what it's just they want more new business. They want the next deal. That's how they're wired. That's how they're driven. Taking a step back and perhaps looking at a reason why it wouldn't work just doesn't compute all the time. And also it's about putting those practices in place, so if they've not been in an environment before where they've had to do that, and they're starting their own business from scratch, so there aren't likely to be any of these kind of frameworks and practices and kind of whatever in place, operating procedures in place, they're just not in the routine and the habit of doing it. So you kind of have to train that into them in a sort of partnership approach when they become a client and they sort of start working with you. But that's a key one. It's like, don't just rush off and think that any bit of business is good business, because generally it's not always.
No. Usually the easiest ones to win are the most difficult bits of business.
But even having
get money out of.
Yeah.
I've just picked up 100 jobs. Yeah. Oh God. Right. Here we go. You're good, but you're not that good. Something else is up here. Yeah.
The big brands, though, a lot of people think, oh, well, I've signed up a big brand, and therefore by definition they'll pay. I'm going to get loads of business out of them and all that sort of stuff. And more often than not, they're the ones with the stupid payment terms, aren't they? They're the ones with the 60, 90-day payment terms from month end and all that sort of nonsense, where they have to invoice in a specific way. And if you don't invoice in that specific way, they're going to reject the invoice. They have to have POs in a certain order. And if you don't have that particular PO per invoice or per whatever, then that falls on its ass as well.
You see, we're fortunate because we started off in accountancy and finance recruitment. So a lot of that terminology you just use there is second nature.
It's pure jargon as well.
What's a PO? If I'm a tech recruiter or if I'm an engineering recruiter, what's a PO? You're asking me for a PO number. I don't know what one of them is. I'll pass that on to Pulse to have a look at. You're gonna have you sorted out payment terms? What do you mean payment terms? Payment terms are what they are. No, they want to negotiate on them, or they're over there. This is turning into 52 days bad debt. Okay, bad debt. What do you mean bad debt? What's wrong with the debt?
Yeah.
Simple
they've
terms
just never
like
been
that.
exposed to it.
No, this is it, right? Yeah. I remember when I first started in accounting and finance recruitment, I was gobsmacked at the thought of needing a credit controlled team. So I was like, what do you mean they don't? Why wouldn't people just pay their bills like that? Isn't that what you're supposed to do? Like you grow up and you're told pay your bills, right? Yeah. So why are companies not paying their bills? That was like an alien concept to me. Like, hang on. So there's a team of people who chase money that's owed to them. Yeah. Why? And every business has got that. Yes. And I'm like, this is nuts. This is absolutely nuts.
And it's like, you wait there. You don't have to pay the invoice as soon as you receive it. Like, what? Yeah. So imagine, that was my thing as well. I was like, I could go to Tesco and be like, yeah, just give me an invoice for that, and I'll pay it in the next 30 to 60 days.
Yeah. It's like, I feel like it, or when you squeeze me enough, and I'm like, all right, fine, I'll pay it. Yeah. But that was an alien concept to me before I started in finance recruitment, and then I always forget that because. I was chatting to a good friend of mine the other day, and they've had a business advisor come in and spend a bit of time with them. They're a tech business, testing business. And he was sort of going, he sat down with us and we've had our first official board meeting. Well, that's great, and he was like, and one of the things he highlighted was like, you guys pay everything on time. Why? You're moaning about cash flow, but every single bill was paid on time.
Or in advance.
It was like, that doesn't make any sense. And it was an alien concept to him. And I was like, but one of your biggest accounts that you do a load of business with, did they pay your invoices on time? And he was like, no, they never do. I'm like, you're on the receiving end of this, but because it's just an alien concept to people. So I kind of get that with, it's an interesting sort of theory. For us, as I said, PO numbers, credit checks, all that sort of stuff are second nature because of the nature of the recruitment we were doing. But if you're a completely different industry and you're sat there having to deal with the finance team and you don't understand these terms of credit and payment terms and PO numbers and bad debt and bad debt protection and this, why is a 30-day invoice acceptable but 32 days is bad? Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And also, like, they can get recruiters can get a new client and again think great, and get their terms and conditions signed, brilliant. What they don't realise is they can be the debtor's terms and conditions sitting behind that somewhere else, which is this thick, with lots of ugly clauses in there and lots of things that really, our client, the recruiter, needs to know about. But again, if they're not exposed to that sort of thing, they won't. So that's part of our job. Our job is to make sure, let's really look at what the underlying relationship is between our client and their debtor, and just make sure we understand that fully, and that there's not, lots of ways that they can wriggle out a payment or delay payment.
And I think having a proactive approach with for an agency is super important in that as well, though, because actually a very dangerous way of kind of doing business is what you said off camera, which is just like, you guys handle that, we pay you for it, so you deal with it.
Totally.
And what they're forgetting is that it's actually your business, and if you don't do it,
you're not an employee anymore. You're not just a salesperson now. You're a business owner. Yeah. And this part that you've always sort of forgotten about, you can't do that anymore.
Well, we had it when we were at Page. We obviously working for this big FTSE business where they've got finance directors and credit controllers and just personnel coming out of their backside because they were that big, right? And we used to have consultants alongside us who would be on the phone fighting with their credit controllers, being like, "What, you're ruining my relationships? Why are you calling them? Why are you doing this? You shouldn't be doing that. They're my client. Only I should be talking to them." And it's like, you've got an invoice that hasn't been paid for 90 days.
Yeah.
Of course they're going to chase. Like, but that's my client. But they're not a client if they're not paying the bill.
Yeah. That's right.
What you've done is you've charitably donated a candidate to that business. Yeah. And now our business is looking at that thinking, hang on, we need to be paid for the work that we've done because you got paid for the work that you did, right? So as now the business has to. Yeah. And you touched on it earlier, which was like salespeople kind of getting mad at the fact that they're having to do credit control or they're having to do bits and pieces that they don't ordinarily do. If you're setting up an agency, you got to suck it up, right? You've got to actually think about, look, this is my business. I'm going to be finance director, credit control manager. I'm going to be marketing manager. I'm going to do wear all the hats that I need to wear to be able to make sure that this thing runs well.
Yeah. When you use services like ours, you are able to kind of effectively outsource a big chunk of that, so that you're not spending days on end in each week having to do that sort of stuff. But what I always say to every client is, you can't just wash your hands of it completely. That would be the worst thing. It's happened and it's really easy to do, which is like, well, I pay you for that, so you get on with it. What's it got to do with me, kind of thing. It can't work like that, and it is a partnership approach. You need to be pushing us to make sure that we're, chasing the debt as proactively as we should be. It never does any harm to kind of give us a nudge or ask about a particular invoice, but you also need to prepare to get involved at certain points, where you kind of, because inevitably we require that, because our client has a different level of relationship with the end debtor than we do. So sometimes there is a genuine dispute or a query, and again, we can't resolve that without our client's involvement. So it's always like, you should be looking at the reports and information that we provide you with. You have to have your finger on the pulse. You can't just turn a blind eye to it all and think, well, I pay someone else to do that. You'll never get the best out of an invoice finance facility if that's the approach you take.
It's the wrong attitude to have, absolutely.
Well, you can flip that on its head to the agency, though, can't you? Like, recruiters, we're an outsourced service. Can a business recruit for themselves? Of course they can. They don't need us. They choose to use us because we're either more efficient or they want access to our network, or whatever reason a business decides to use an agency. Now, the worst businesses for us to recruit for are the ones that are like, here's a job spec, find me some candidates. And that's it. That's all we hear from them. Or upload your candidates onto a portal. Here's a job spec, here's a portal, upload your candidates on there.
Yeah.
That's the only involvement you're going to get from us. So at this point, we don't know the culture of the business. We don't know the type of personality they're looking for. We don't know a whole plethora of different things that we need to know for us to be able to find the right person. And as recruiters, we're probably the worst people to look at outsourcing functions and utilize them properly, because we either have that approach of you do it.
We want our customers to see us as an extension of their business, but then the services that we as business owners have supplying to us, we don't see as an extension of our own business at times.
We see them as a supplier.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's an odd one, but I think it's that biller mentality, and you almost don't want to lose that, because you do want them to kind of be tenacious and go after business and keep banging that phone and all the rest of it. You want all that good shit, right? But you almost kind of want them to be like, just be a bit more aware of this stuff now, because
it's that business acumen piece, isn't it?
Yeah. That grows over time.
It's a really delicate. It's a fine line, It's a blend between that. That's what our relationship with our agency clients should be. It's that, we are what sits behind it and provides the framework and the the finance and the processes and everything else, and our client is the commercial aspect and growing the business and doing what they do best, which is selling. But there is a little gentle kind of blend between the two, which is, we have to be commercial in our outlook as well.
Yeah.
But then our client also needs to kind of meet us halfway and understand that it's just sensible business practice to have certain checks and balances in place, and just frivolously going out and grabbing any bit of business you can. You mentioned concentration limits earlier on. Like, it's just, we're flexible in regards to concentration limits, but you have to be conscious of the risk that presents. If you've got all your eggs in one basket and it's going and going and going and going, and then all of a sudden something goes pear-shaped, it's quite possibly the end of your business. So,
do you want to explain concentration limits to the listeners, for those that don't know what a concentration limit is?
Sure. Yeah, it's otherwise known as a high involvement limit, which might be a bit more descriptive actually around what it is, but it's where effectively our agency client has a high concentration of business with a small number of debtors. So the most extreme point being 100% of their business with one debtor. That is as highly concentrated as you can get.
So if I'm let's say an industrial recruiter, and I've got, I don't know, like a raw mail contract, and all of my temps are just going through raw mail, that would mean that I've got 100% concentration then, with that one debtor being raw mail.
Exactly.
Right. So at what point does that become too high then?
It would depend. So it's an interesting example, Royal Mail. Got to be honest, I haven't looked at their credit rating for a little while, and I know they've had a few problems recently. I was going to say there probably wouldn't be an issue with Royal Mail, because I
don't work with them anymore.
No, but that's what you look at. You look at the debtor. So so for example, we've had clients that have had 100% of their business with the NHS. And there are certain quirks and issues with dealing with the NHS and getting paid promptly, but the creditworthiness is not one of them. So again, at one end of the scale, 100% of your business with the NHS wouldn't be an issue, because they're
right. So there's more to it than just a mathematical formula.
Exactly. Yeah. It's 60% the profile is okay, of that
62% is too much. That kind of thing.
It depends very much on who you're dealing with, and then other aspects will come into that. So it's the. I mean, we're talking specifically about recruitment, but more generally, it would be the nature of the services, the nature of work that's being delivered to that debtor. How complex is that in nature? So there's quite a bit that comes in under, beneath just the headline concentration limit. There's a lot of factors that kind of determine it. In recruitment terms, because we're effectively talking about timesheet debt, the biggest consideration would be the creditworthiness of the debtor. So the other extreme would be if it's Joe Bloggs Limited down the road that's only been established for a year, and that's your only debtor, and you want to continue to make that your only debtor and just pile more and more temps into that business at some point, and probably fairly early on, we'd be saying, well, you need to stop. You need to try and spread your concentration, because fully exposing yourself to a business that hasn't got a particularly strong track record or credit profile is not a sensible thing to do.
So is that advice that you would give, or is that a hard line that that is common practice in the industry then?
It's generally common. There are some providers that don't have a concentration limit approach. Most do, I would say, sort of traditional invoice factoring businesses. It's not hard and fast. We have credit guidelines. We don't have a credit policy, but that sort of approach and that sort of mindset is what we would take with every client. So absolutely, if we thought they were overexposing themselves to a debtor that just doesn't that doesn't necessarily support that level of exposure, then the advice it's advice, but we would have to say no at some point. We wouldn't just let them trade.
So why would a recruiter say no to that then? So why would they say no, absolutely not? I'm still going to trade with Joe Bloggs Limited. He's asked me for another 100 people in his warehouse. I need to provide them. Why would they not want to give themselves more exposure to wider businesses?
Because it's really easy for just human beings to kind of only see the silver linings and not see the potential pitfalls. It just really is. And then they might speak to that, the director of that business down the road, and oh no, don't worry, oh no, it'd be fine, I know we haven't been established. Everything's great. And it's really easy to buy into that when you want to be successful and you just want to place, you want to go and put more business out, and you're seeing the margin in it, and you're thinking, great, happy days. It's just really, really tempting. And that's what I mean about trying to get that kind of blend between us and our client. That's how we need to work together, because that it's almost like you said earlier on, you kind of don't want to curb that to some extent. No. It's their job to get excited about that. That's what they're there for. But they do need a sounding board, and they do need at some point someone that's going to say,
you don't want them being a cynic with every bit of business that they're doing. But at the same time,
let's be blunt about it. We make money on our clients growing their businesses and doing more business.
So breaking news.
It doesn't make a lot. We're not going to say no for the hell of it. Because that's how we make money.
It's risk aversion, isn't it? That's basically what we're looking at is how do we...
It's management, risk management.
How do we limit your risk? How do we limit the agency risk? And ultimately, the money that you make off that agency depends on them trading. So it's not like you don't want them to trade.
Exactly.
So it's super important, really, isn't it, for any kind of recruiter looking to set up, to start putting on different hats around the wider business then, not just kind of focusing on billing.
Absolutely. And like I said before, there's plenty of support available around that, because, again, the extreme of that is that if they're running around with all those hats on, then the thing that will suffer is the billing side of it. It's always the bit that gets pushed back and pushed back. So, again, we can get introduced to... I can sit down in front of early stage agency owners now who have tried to sort of go it alone, and they'll say, well, Monday, Tuesday, I'm just chasing timesheets in, and that's a faff, and that takes ages. And then Wednesday, I'm sort of making sure that I've got the funds to kind of transmit the payments so they're there for Friday morning. And then Friday, I've always inevitably got one or two payroll queries, so I'm having to deal with that. So that's 4/5 of the week gone straight away, and then and credit control on a Thursday, I bet. So it's like, so then so again, it comes back to that partnership approach, and it's about they will always need to wear all the hats to some extent, because it's their business, ultimately they're building it for themselves. But what we enable them to do, I suppose, and other partners that can support them in various areas, is only wear those hats for a few minutes each week, rather than nearly every day of the week, so that they can focus far more time on growing the business, which is what they're there to do and what they want to do.
So you mentioned earlier then, so you started utilising LinkedIn a lot more to kind of almost educate an audience of startups and scaling businesses or kind of high billers, right? What kind of advice would you give, or what kind of regular comments do you get in your inbox and in comments and stuff that you think would be worth talking about and sharing, to sort of just put myths to bed or rumours to bed, and
I think, we touched on it earlier on. I think one of the most surprising things for me is just how little awareness there is about particularly cash flow solutions that are available. Funding is the biggest obstacle, understandably, because it's temp business is obviously a very cash thirsty business to be in, so it's understandable that that's the major consideration. So a lot of it is just quite an eye opener in terms of a lot of top billers out there are just not aware of what options are available to them, so they put it off, thinking that it's an obstacle that is too big. They need to save up for ages, or they need to look at different options. And a lot of them are then it's everything we're talking about. They're not particularly au fait or comfortable with the back office and just see back office as a big monster. You know, like I've worked for a firm that just took care of all of that, and it looked like it was a bit of a headache and a lot of hassle. And then they might start to delve into doing a bit of their own research, as people do when they're looking at these things and doing the prep, and get scared off by it a little bit and think, you know, crikey, that sounds like an absolute minefield. But, you know, as we've been talking about, you know, today already, it's, you know, we take care of a massive chunk of that, and there's lots of support out there at various stages through the startup process where, you know, I firmly believe recruitment is probably one of the lowest barriers of entry in terms of setting up than there ever could be, because everything's geared up for it. So that's a lot of it's just that uncertainty, you know, around, well, what would I do, you know, and what would be associated with any new start, whether it's recruitment or whatever, you know. It's all those sort of like, you know, it feels like a massive leap
for me.
It's scary.
How often does the equity question come up for you?
A lot, actually. I mean, it's, you know, I think that's what's interesting again, is that will tend to be probably the first port of call a lot of the time, is, you know, I'm going to have to look at the, you know, giving away a bit of my business to get some startup capital, to get a bit of a support in the early stages. And in certain circumstances, I'm sure that's a good fit, you know, it absolutely, but not every circumstance, you know, and if I'm honest, I've seen startup agencies that have ended up with us that have given a slice of their agency away in the, you know, at the beginning, and are probably scratching their heads now thinking, was that probably wasn't the smartest move. And it's, you know, it's never easy to kind of reverse that situation. So yeah, and you know, speak to a lot of startup recruiters that will, you know, have kind of explored that option, spent a lot of time exploring that option, have felt a bit uncomfortable with giving a bit of their agency away for well, quite a chunk of their agency away for.
I was going to say, it's more recently, it's becoming more like the equity splits are becoming more and more ridiculous.
Yeah,
I mean, some of the people that I'm speaking to, I'm sort of like, what was the point in setting up?
Yeah,
just to have your name above the door.
A lot of these guys are just like very minority shareholders. Like so for those that don't know, you have like a person with significant control within a business. So generally speaking, that's like 25% or more is a person with significant control. A lot of these guys who are setting up now are way below that threshold. So actually, they've got no significant control of their business as it is anyway. Really, all they've got is some sort of
no real decision
no decision making, no voting rights, the only thing they've got is maybe directorship.
And the reason I asked that question is because I think, again, but from sort of Rec Tools for us is a great platform to be able to speak to sort of service providers like you guys and get an idea of what's going on in your world. But actually, also a lot of startup want to be startups and kind of, you know, sort of feeling the pinch 3-5 year approaching agencies. I'm speaking to those guys all the time as well, right? And what I've noticed is there's a trend in the top biller decides, right, I'm going to go and start up. And the first point of call is usually an investor, because they think it's always easier to spend someone else's money, right? Let's be frank.
Yeah.
So then they go down that route, and then they start hearing all this terminology and stuff, and then they're kind of like, oh, hang on. And they almost sometimes stumble upon invoice factoring, invoice financing, because the wording's used all the time. And let me look at what this is, and then you guys pop up as an example.
Yeah.
And it's almost by it's almost by kind of like association that the equity conversation creeps in, because in their mind it's like, hang on, so you're going to do all the back office stuff for me, you're going to do my credit checks, you're going to help me with things like terms of business, and you're going to, you know, chase the debt for me, and you're going to you know, finance it and run my temps for me and my temp book and do the timesheet stuff and do the invoicing. Of course you're going to take an equity split, because that's what the investor said they were going to do. You know, they were going to do all of that, and they wanted 10, 15, 20, 40, 80, sometimes 85% of my business. So how much are you guys going to want, right?
Yeah.
It's almost by association alone that these guys are kind of like, it's no through no fault of their own that they're like, but what's the catch here then?
Right?
Yeah, but often they get spun a bit of a web as well, though, don't they? Because sometimes it's a case of, and I remember speaking to one particular person who was like, I'm not going to pay a fee for somebody chasing money that's already owed to me. And I remember saying to that person,
then cast your mind back to like 10 years ago, me sitting there and like just being completely gobsmacked at the thought of there's an entire department in
For
a
credit
finance
control.
team.
No, but the
You know
point
what I
was
mean?
that
Like,
this person.
of course, that thought process is going to be
No,
there.
but this person was ready to give up equity.
Yeah.
Because it was like, no, but I'd sooner give away equity than give away my fees. And I'm like, I don't think your maths is quite adding up here, because if you're paying a small percentage of your invoice towards chasing fees, that's cheaper than a credit controller. To hire a full-time credit controller would cost you 25, 30k or whatever.
Yeah.
This is going to cost you significantly less. If your business is billing X amount, it's probably going to be worth a lot more than this like fee that you're having to spend. And they just weren't grasping that, because again, for them, what they saw was the shareholdings isn't cash in my pocket, but the invoice, the invoice financing.
If I've made 10 grand margin,
and I've got to give $2,000 to an invoice financing, and it's never as much as $2,000. But if I've got to give $2,000 to an invoice financing company,
that's my $2,000 that you've taken.
Yeah.
Whereas 25% of my fictitious business,
yeah,
that hasn't yet filed any accounts, so therefore the turnover is, do you know what I mean? That could be worth 20 grand, but it isn't right now.
No.
So I suppose there's that element to consider. So you as a business then, like, kind of, what is your marketing effort and outreach then? So how are you guys, because obviously, I mean, there's only so much you can do on your own personal LinkedIn, right? But like, how are you guys then going out and educating these billers that you want to go and start up and kind of nurture that relationship, plus also the ones that are already out there going, right, I'm setting up, now where do I start?
We put quite a bit out via sort of like the recruitment press, so quite a bit of sort of PR, which is sort of educational pieces or awareness pieces, if you like, that we put out fairly regularly. To be honest, our own client base is quite a good source of business as well. It's a fairly close knit community, I think, recruitment, as an industry, and actually our own clients, who are obviously the best advocates we could ever have, are actually quite a valuable source of new business for us as well. So they've all got strong personal networks, so they talk to people who are thinking about starting up or have started up and have been doing XYZ to kind of get to this stage, but now looking at options. Quite a bit of that as well.
But that's always quite important in most sectors, though, isn't it? Because actually, what a lot of people want to do is justify, like the psychology of sales, is justifying your own purchase.
Yeah, exactly.
If I bought a brand new car that has got X, Y, and Z, I'm going to justify it to myself with, but I needed that car because of whatever. I could have bought something totally different that did the exact same job, but I've got to justify it to myself. And the best way I can justify it to myself is by getting my friends and my family on board to do the same thing.
Of course, yeah.
So it's naturally, you'll find that you're right. Those guys are going to be huge ambassadors of, no, you got to check out Pulse. Go speak to Terry at Pulse, because those guys really sorted me out. We did it with Mark. We kept speaking to him about 3R. We're like, listen, mate, you need to go to 3R because they really sorted us out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So obviously you've got your own network and your own customers and LinkedIn and stuff like that. Now, what do you think your industry could do better to kind of get the marketing message out there, to educate the up and comers?
I think more sort of just educational material in terms of, and not necessarily, I mean, I think now people sort of digest things better when they're in sort of video format and that kind of thing. When we were talking earlier on, that was kind of rattling around in my mind already as something I think we should probably do next, which is, and just like really straightforward stuff like, how does this work for a recruitment business?
Just
what
simple
do we do?
explainer videos and stuff. It's really funny, right? Because that's like kind of my bag right now. I'm like ingrained in sort of social marketing and the best ways and all the rest of it. And everywhere you look, it's like most people's attention span is about 10 to 15 seconds. Because of things like TikTok and like the old Vine and all the rest of it. We want to consume like as much as possible in as much little time as possible. And we're coming up with sort of strategies and stuff with some of our partners on Rec Tools, and I'm kind of like, I don't want a half an hour demo video sent in to me. You need to give me a 10-second, because that's how people consume information right now. We are consuming information so quickly, and we are able to process it so quickly as well. And actually, if you can break down a 2-minute video into sort of 10-15 second kind of segments of an education piece, you'd be surprised how much that will get kind of noticed and picked up.
You
know what I mean?
Well, have you ever
Yeah,
found yourself getting into like some sort of like TikTok wormhole or like a YouTube Shorts wormhole where like you watch the one video and it's like, oh shit, I got to watch the follow up to that.
Yeah.
And then I'm about 6 videos in, and then like, oh, I don't even know how I got here, but this weird French film that I've seen now over like 10 segments was brilliant.
Yeah.
And it makes us self-proclaimed experts as well, right? You watch like 2 10-second videos and you're like, that's it, I know everything there is to know about geopolitics.
I get it now. Yeah. I've seen a lot of it on property stuff. There's a lot of property gurus on TikTok for some reason, all saying a variety of different stuff, and they're all in very short format video, and they get so much more engagement. But the longer videos seem to not do so well. Yeah. And I'm like, there's a trend here, and I think people, less is more has always been a phrase that's kind of thrown around, right? But I think like whereas our generation was used to watching a 15-minute explainer video. Yeah. You know, think about now, like if the last video that you watched to get help, well, maybe you're fixing your car or something, you skip through to what you think is going to be the more important bits, don't you? Yeah. And it's almost like that seems to be where we're all conditioned to now. Yeah. So I would say to anyone looking at kind of moving to video format is condense as much as you can. Yeah. And you'll be surprised as to sort of, because all you need to do is give them a little snippet. Yeah. You know,
just key points.
Yeah. Give them and then have them, because you want them to have the question of, well, what's that then? And then that will generate the inbound inquiry of, right, I saw your video, I need to know more about this. Like,
and people want to be
What do you
educated.
mean I haven't got to give away equity in my business? You know, what do you mean you'll do more back office, my invoicing, my this, my this, my this? What the hell is pay and bill? That sounds interesting. Tell me about that. You know, I'm sat billing 450 grand a year for this agency in London. And I really want to be living in Bulgaria, and I can do this job over there, but they're not letting me. I'm going to set up on my own, and if I can bill even a third of that for myself, that's money in my pocket. And you're going to be like, happy days, come this way. Yeah. But hey ho. So to summarise, then you're seeing a big increase in people wanting to start up, then, yeah.
Yeah. I think there's always been a fairly solid demand for that, and it fluctuates a bit. But I think second half of this year in particular, definitely seeing.
What do you think's driving that?
Interestingly enough, we're on track this year for a record number of incorporations of recruitment, new recruitment businesses, the biggest year ever, and last year was the last biggest year ever. Yeah. So there's a funny trend at the moment towards startup. I think a lot of that is actually, you know, it feels like a long time ago now, but it wasn't. But post-COVID and kind of like, you know, everyone kind of shifting to that work from home sort of model for a period of time, now kind of being asked to come back into offices and do whatever. I think a lot of people saw the lifestyle benefits of it and then kind of think, well, actually in recruitment, it shouldn't be too difficult for me to set up on my own, and I can have all those lifestyle benefits I've been enjoying for the last few years forever. So maybe that's driven quite a bit of it.
I think a lot of it is people being sick of being employed as well, though.
Yeah.
I think a lot like we're finding it when we're recruiting for recruiters, it's so hard to find talented actual billers who are willing to move to an agency like ours. I mean, we're still a small agency, and for us to entice people who are coming from either big corporates or even sort of competitors, they're kind of already at that point where they're like, yeah, look, I feel like I could do it for myself.
Yeah, I'm probably going to set up in the next year or so.
Yeah, if I make a third of whatever I was billing here, then I'm quite happy. That's a good lifestyle for me. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of people that are just...
I don't think job security is a thing anymore either, is it?
No. Yeah, true. Yeah.
Think about how many businesses... I mean, Wilco's in the news right now. Yeah. I'm sure there still will be when this goes out, but you know, a big brand like Wilco's is gone overnight. 12,000 people out of work overnight. Yeah. Where's your job security, right? Yeah. Like, you can't be like, oh yeah, no, I work for a 50-year-old retailer with 12,000 staff. Today you do, tomorrow it could be gone.
Yeah.
So
that industry is
yeah. That's two pretty big drivers there for it.
Yeah.
So I think, and again, it's probably again partly why I've sort of I've gravitated with more sort of effort towards that startup scaling part of the market, because I think you just have to look at the data. It sort of tells you that it's going to be big. I do notice, just again through the work I spend on looking at this data and trying to make contact with these individuals that are setting up agencies, that a lot of them will set up with that sort of timescale in mind, like a year or two. So you'll see companies set up now this year, and it might be next year. It could even be the year beyond that they actually look to launch and go live. But they'll use that for. It feels like a good step to them. I've got the company set up. Yeah. I'm in research phase, and that's what I mean. I think if the education is better in that research phase, if the resources they can tap into and the answers are more easily available and digestible, and they can just get it and understand what's what, is that actually that length of time will shorten. They'll start sooner because
on that though. I think
the job feels less, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, they get the answers they need.
Sorry.
I think people that set up in that way need to be very careful as well, because a lot of employment contracts will state that intellectual property and whatever they create during their employment with a particular business belongs to that business. Right. We had this issue when we so if you were to we delayed our setup by a day or two, didn't we? Because we were still on garden leave and we were unsure as to kind of exactly what date our garden leave was finished. So we pushed it back by a couple of days, because if we'd have set up, and this was advice given to us by 3R actually, is that if you set it up now, he goes, then they could hold on to that until you become a decent sized billing business, and then pull it in and be like, right, okay, you actually owe us that. Ouch. And it's a shitty thing to do. And I don't think they would have done it, but actually, people should protect themselves from that.
Be aware of kind of
those kind of clauses
again,
in your employment contract.
You could set up you could register a business or whatever and still be employed by somebody, and then kind of be like, oh, I'll run an invoice through that. Oh, I'll do that and then it starts becoming a blurry line. Yeah. You mentioned that there's obviously the number of new businesses at its highest, right? Interestingly, also the number of recruitment agencies closing down is also at its highest right now. What do you think that is?
Because big billers don't always make good business people.
Or maybe that's a bit of like the cycle of life almost with these recruiters, in that you've got bigger, more established, longer established agencies hitting hard times, perhaps with fairly significant cost bases, and then all of a sudden, and obviously we know that costs have been increasing left, right, and centre. So could have been enough with agencies that might have survived the last few years but come out with a lot of debt and still a fairly significant level of cost base that's increased significantly probably this year. It might have just tipped them over the edge. And then again, you could have individuals coming out of that job security. Maybe this is a chance for me to look at my own kind of, plans for life and where I want to be. So it kind of, and then it starts again.
It's
they become the next
prophecy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a circle. It's it's and I think. And that's what's always, in all honesty, I've always felt it's quite interesting about the recruitment sector again, is that it's quite counter-cyclical. It's there's always pockets of recruitment that are really prospering even when times are hard. Yeah. And obviously generally all of it prospers quite well when times are good. But that's why it's quite a robust industry, and it's standing up a lot better than the perm market is at the moment. It really is, which is another reason why I think more recruiters, perm specialist recruiters, should be looking at temp or contract placements, because it's a massive market and it's holding up a lot better. It's fairly stable. It's fairly, it's flat, but that's versus a perm market that is shrinking massively,
flows
rapidly
all the time, and it seems to be going that way in that direction. Right.
And I think if more recruiters understood how easy it is to set up a contract desk, it's not easy to run a contract desk and go out, but to actually set up the structure you need.
The bit they're scared about is actually not that scary.
No.
Yeah. The more difficult bit is actually the recruitment part.
Yeah.
In reality.
Yeah. Within 10 days they could have the finance lined up so that they never have to worry about where the money's going to come from to pay temps or contractors. They can have a payroll solution set up. They can have a credit control solution set up, and they can have a credit management function so they're not exposed to bad debt.
And for some of them as well, there's a VAT function as well, isn't there, where you end up holding on to the VAT so that when it comes to the VAT bill time,
so that's not a surprise.
You release it and then that's paid.
We do that because generally, if you look at a recruitment business, we kind of take the view that if they're running it honestly and sensibly, only really probably two major ways that they're going to get into bother. And one is trading with clients they shouldn't be trading with, which goes back to our previous conversation. But we cover that because we check them out and we keep checking them out, and we include protection against bad debt and stuff like that. And then the other way is VAT. We've seen that time and time again. It's too easy to dip into the VAT pot and use it. And again, if margins are getting squeezed, they'll kind of absorb that a little bit by using VAT money, etc., etc. So if you're working with a partner that looks after your VAT and looks after your client book in terms of credit management, the two biggest reasons that you're ever going to really fail as a temp recruiter are mitigated
Yeah.
significantly.
And you guys are there to kind of hold the hand,
Yeah,
help them through it. Cool.
So, as a 20-year vet, then how do in the industry of kind of outsourced and kind of invoice financing, how do people reach you? How do they get your advice? How do they talk to the Wolfman?
I think most recruiters are on LinkedIn. Generally, and
They're fucking better, bitch.
exactly.
That's question number one into their. You want to work with Pulse? Yeah. You want LinkedIn? No, get out. Let's go.
You kind of expect them to be. So that's straight away. That's probably one of the most obvious places to go to find me.
Yeah.
And I post regularly, almost every day, probably. So I'm usually pretty easy to find. Or visit our website, pulseoutsource.com, and they can fill in a form, and it will come straight through to me, and I can contact them there.
Sounds good. There you go.
Awesome.
I appreciate that. Mate, thank you so much for popping down today
Thank you.
and sharing your thoughts. It's been really helpful.
Really enjoyed it. Thanks very much.
Cheers, Eric.
Cheers.
Thank you.